you what I want to know. There's your mic right there. So doing research for this panel, I read your book, Warp Factors. Well, I listened to it. If you haven't listened to that book, it's on Spotify, and it's incredible. It's fun. There's amazing stories on there. And I really kind of wanted to start with those early days when you were in New York. You have this backdrop of history, and I just wonder what, from your childhood, what story do you like to tell the most about growing up? About growing up.
Growing up. Well, you know, I had no idea as a kid, or as a teenager for that matter, or as a college student, that I would end up being an actor. I mean, I did several plays in school, and one in a camp, and they always cast me as the lead, which was very nice. But I was a shy kid, and it was each time that I got that approbation, that approval, it felt like it was the first time, and I never got tired of it. It didn't happen all that frequently, but when it did happen, it made me feel a lot better about myself. So I guess in my sophomore year in high school, I went to a private school, very exclusive and very academically oriented. I mean, I was one of the big athletes. You can imagine what kind of school it was if I was one of the big athletes. But we did a play called Peer Gynt, and I did the lead. And I was nobody knew me. I was very quiet. I was sort of in the background. And suddenly, I'm doing the lead in this play, and everybody is noticing that I'm around. And some of the young ladies in my class started looking at me a little differently. And it was all so ego-stroking. It just felt so good. I kept waiting for it. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know, this can't be really about me. And it wasn't, a slam dunk. It wasn't as if everything I did was, it was very popular or anything like that. But it was enough reinforcement. I'm sure you could all relate to that. Enough things that happen that make you feel good about yourself, and that you call upon when you're not feeling so good about yourself. So those things are there to make you feel that you are worthwhile. So I think that particular experience of doing the lead in the play was the thing that stands out in my mind.
That kind of set the stage for you. You tell an awesome story about how you found out you got the part of Chekhov. Would you like to share that?
You guys don't know that story? Okay, because I've told it a lot of times. First of all, before I tell you, I got to go back, give you a little insight into what an it's an extraordinary world. Things happen, you never anticipate them. I'm in awe of people who, at the age of 10, knew what they wanted to do and plotted their lives for the time when they could would materialize, and they would have the adult futures that they dreamed of. Never occurred to me. But as far as Star Trek is concerned, you gotta go back. Star Trek was 1967. In 1964, I got called in to read for a TV series called Mr. Novak. It was on for 2 years. They used a lot of young people on the show. And I came in to read for the part of a Russian student who was defecting to the United States. And I read a few lines with my quote, Russian accent. And the director really liked it, was very impressed. And I thought, oh, that's great. And I went away thinking I had the role. Well, this is all important. I know it seems like there's an 88-year-old man who's rambling, you know, without to do with anything. It does, I swear to you, it does. I find, so I knew the casting director, and I called him, and I said, how's it going? He says, you're in the running for the lead. I said, great. He says, but they've discovered that they're not happy with the script. I mean, this is so bizarre. I mean, like you never can anticipate these things. They're not happy, so they're rewriting the script. And as a consequence, the director has a lot of time on his hands, and he's decided to read more actors for the part. I mean, it was a fait accompli. I was going to play this role, I thought. Well, they got a young actor in. He was he'd been in a big movie that a very famous director directed. It was called America, America. It was about two Greek kids coming to the States. And the second lead was this young man who was submitted for the same role that I had just read for. Well, there's no particularly polite way to say it. He was very flamboyant. His performance was very, this was a very uptight kid. You people in America, you don't know what you're doing. And he was all over the place. The director loved it. He loved this, may I say, effeminate performance. And he took him home for the weekend. But before he took him home for the weekend, he had me come back because he felt obligated to have me read and see if I could do it that way, this other way. And if I had thought it was the director's choice, I would have tried. But knowing it was another actor's choice, and he wanted me to mimic another actor, whose choice I thought was really peculiar, I think I couldn't do it. In conscience, I couldn't do it. So when he asked me, I said, I'm sorry, I don't see that part being played the way you describe it, and I can't do it. He says, you don't do it, you don't get the part. I said, thank you, where's my hat? I'm on my way out. And indeed, I went home, they cast the other actor. Now that should have been the end of it, right? Dean Jagger, who was one of the regulars on the show, became ill. And he had a big role in the episode that I had read for. So they decided to postpone that episode. They postponed it like 6 weeks until Dean Jagger was well. So now that actor isn't available, that director isn't available, and they call me back in. I literally read one line. New director. Says, you got the part. That was it, one line. Did the episode, went well, everybody was happy. Now the pages fly. It's 3 years later, 1967. The same casting director, Mr. Novak, is now the casting director in Star Trek. So he brings me back in, because I had played a Russian once before. I look at the lines. It's a very serious scene. Captain, the ship is about to blow up. What are they going to do? And I read it with all the fear and concern, and the fact that I'm a young ensign, and not totally disciplined. And I think I've done an extraordinarily good job. And I get done, and there's dead silence in the room. Nobody's even looking at me. They're looking at their toes. And I go, what the hell? How else could I have played this? And Gene Roddenberry says, yeah, that was nice, but can you make it funny? How do you make that funny? Come on. You have to have some integrity as an actor. you know, I'm not a total prostitute. I'm not a total. But this came from the producer. This wasn't asking me to do another actor's performance. So I tried. Captain, guess what? She is about to blow up. They just wanted to see if I could do that comedy. I did that line, and I got the part. They only read one other actor for the role. So that's, you know, oh, and I was, after I read in Gene's office, they put me back in the outer office, said, wait here. Everybody was in Gene's office, and each office had an exit into the principal hallway. And they all left from Gene's office through this exit door, and there was nobody there. I didn't know that. I was sitting in the outer office. The sun went down. Finally, somebody comes in, says, are you Koenig, whatever it is? And I said, yes. He says, come with me. Now this is true. This is not an elaboration. This is not for the purpose of humor, although I hope you're going to laugh. He drops to his knees in this room, puts his hand on my crotch, and I said, what are you doing? I didn't see the tape measure in his other hand. He says, well, I have to measure you for a costume, don't I? That's how I found out.
Oh, I love that. And then I read that the part was originally called Jones.
Yeah.
For Davy Jones.
Right.
So talk to me about the Davy Jones factor. What did that fan mail look like?
What is that?
The fan mail. What was the fan mail like for you?
Well, they hit the right audience. They wanted the 8 to 14-year-olds. And Davy Jones, who was a member of a musical group called the Monkees, and they had their own show. They were enormously successful, but they were canceled very quickly. I don't know why, but they were enormously successful. And Gene Roddenberry wanted a character on Star Trek who would appeal to the pencil and line paper crowd, you know. And that was part of the instruction to the casting director when they were going to get actors to read for this part. Now, I stood next to Davy Jones, and we're both part of the Homo sapien species, but we don't look alike. He was short. Well, he was shorter, but he had a lot more hair. In any case, they brought me on to appeal to that group. And as a consequence, the role never became terribly significant other than the fact that I was groovy. I got a lot of mail about how groovy I was. And how they loved my hair, which wasn't my hair. It said started to thin, and we went up to Max Factor, which was a big cosmetics place on Hollywood Boulevard, and we brought back 4 or 5 wigs, and we checked out the wigs. There was a blonde wig, and I said, my God, if they give me that, I can't ever appear in person again. And so I wore the wig for the first 6 or 7 weeks, which the fans loved. They didn't know it was a wig. And that's when I got all the groovy mail. That was the term of the times. So, and then my hair grew out enough so that we could comb it forward, and you wouldn't see the thinning on the top. So, for the second, third, for most of the second and third season was my hair. When the first 6 episodes was not. Then when we went to the movies, by then it was another 10 years, and I knew that there's no way I could appeal to the young set as a bald man. So then I went out and I got a hairpiece, and I wore that throughout the movies. And there came a point when I decided, you take me the way I am or forget about it. So I stopped wearing it.
Absolutely. So you've been asked over the years about working with the different actors, but I want to know, what would they say about you? What would your co-stars say about you?
Brilliant.
Modest.
I know what Bill Shatner would say. He'd say, "Who?" Yeah, there wasn't much rapport between the supporting actors and Bill. It was just the way he was designed. And I understand, the 60s, there was a whole different milieu regarding the people on the show. You had the 2 or 3 stars, and if there were other characters who were running characters, they were generally subordinate characters, and we were definitely subordinate characters. So, yeah, Bill, in fact, this is to me, when we were going to do the movie, we already done 2 seasons of Star Trek, and then several years go by, and then we're going to do the motion picture. And they erected a bridge. They brought in, they invited about 100 journalists, camera people, photographers, and Bill, and we sat at our places, the helm, the Navigators Council, engineer, and Bill came out, my hand to God, and he introduced everybody. Hi. Let me introduce you to the cast of Star Trek. This is George Takei, who plays Sulu. This is Jimmy Doohan, who plays Scotty, the engineer. This is Nichelle Nichols, who plays Uhura. DeForest Kelly plays Dr. McCoy. Leonard Nimoy, who plays Mr. Spock. And Mr. Chekhov. Didn't know my name. So you get the sense of my relationship with him. But I got along with everybody else. Leonard was Mr. Spock all the time. I mean, it was a little, once you understood, you didn't take it personally. But I mean, he was the method actor in our group. He just did not drop that character. And I heard later on that the family had some problems with him as well, because he brought it home. He brought Mr. Spock home to his family. But I loved DeForest. DeForest was a great guy. He was able to move from the Leonard Shatner contingent to the rest of us without any problem. It was very, very fluid. He was very warm and friendly. Jimmy was a little on the volatile side. He was very passionate and a good friend, but he could get angry. Nichelle was great. She was the first one who introduced herself to me. And George, I got along with right from the beginning. So, did I miss anybody? No. So yeah, that was fine. I understood the rules. The rules were Mr. Shatner was not going to talk to you. And once I didn't take it personally. I was grateful that I had a series to do, that I was being called in every week. Regardless of the fact that there were lots of times when the extent of my dialogue was aye, Captain. But the idea that I was a working actor, that I had people that responded to me, that it all went okay. No, it was terrific on that basis.
So, when did you know Star Trek was a phenomenon? When did that really start?
Well, I was cast between the first and second season. I wasn't on the first season. But I remember that there was going to be a picket line at NBC by fans who were concerned between the first and second season we'd be picked up for the second season. Because there was a lot of talk about NBC not being happy with our numbers and that the show cost too much. So I went down there before anybody knew me, and I saw all these fans. And they were really militant about their passion. And I said, man, that's interesting. I hadn't really seen that before. So I got an inkling of that even before I was on the show. And then I started hearing stories about how the fans were so enthusiastic, and I got a ton of mail. We had a fan service. Paramount had a fan service called United Fan that would take our mail, and I don't know, if they chose to reply to it, they would be the ones who did it. But then they stopped. I don't know what the ramifications were, why it all stopped, but the mail was coming directly to us. And I had these huge canvas bags of mail. And for the first couple of months, I actually tried to reply to everybody, which was bizarre, because if it only takes you 3 minutes to read the letter, it's going to take you a half an hour to write it, to write a reply. So I understood that our fan base was pretty vociferous and pretty militant. I didn't know the extent of it. And certainly, when Gene Roddenberry called us in 1969, I think it was, spring of '69, and said, "It's been nice working with you. I hope we can do it again sometime." I thought that was the end. Now, what will I do with the rest of my life? That's pretty much where I was sitting. And the first couple of years were really tough. 1970, 1971, I didn't get any work. I didn't get any phone calls to audition. And I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I had a wife, I had a little baby. I was really concerned. I started writing. I wrote a novel without ever having taken a course in writing. I didn't outline, I didn't break it down, I just started writing. It was a bizarre science fantasy stories. Well, satiric fantasy story. And but it got me through a very, very tough period. I had something to do every morning. I had a reason to get up. Otherwise, I had no reason to get up. So that started, and then Susan Sackett, who was Gene Roddenberry's secretary, I wrote a screenplay, and we didn't have computers. We used typewriters, and I was a one-finger typist. So I hired her to type up my screenplay. And she liked it enough to tell Gene about it. And Gene read it, and he liked it enough to ask me if I would write the second half of a novel that he had written. It was going to be, the novel was originally going to be, I may have gotten this wrong, but I'm so freaking old, you gotta expect it. I think it was going to be the first Star Trek movie, but it had religious elements in it. Not elements that supported religion, but rather that was saying that religion is not really consequential to life. And the guy who was I got his name. His name was Barry Diller. He was the head of Paramount. He was Catholic and quite religious, and he was really upset about the story that Gene was writing to be the first Star Trek movie. So that was killed. But Gene didn't want to give up the story, so he was writing the novel. And then that stopped, and he asked me if I would finish the novel. And I did. I wrote about 120 pages. So I wrote half and he wrote half. And I was told it was very well received, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's when the powers and said, well, we changed our mind, we will do a movie. So the Star Trek The Motion Picture was sort of it was inspired initially by the first one that he was writing, but it changed, and the religion thing did not become an important element. And so they made that movie, and I finished his novel. But since he got the movie, he didn't care about the novel. So that was put neutral. I still have a copy of it. But, yeah, I don't know what the point was of all that. Anyway.
I think it was a fantastic story. So we're going to start taking questions. If you want to come up to the mic. While they do that, do you own anything from the set or from the movies?
Do I own anything?
Yes.
I did own my outfit from Star Trek 4, the leather outfit that I wore in the streets. I wore the jacket, and I really liked it. But when I wore the pants, the leather pants, I started getting whistles from guys. So I sold the whole freaking thing. So no, I don't.
Not anymore. All right, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Scott. I am the co-host of a Star Trek podcast called Trekcast. It's an honor to meet you, sir. My producer had a lot of questions that he wanted to ask, but I'm going to ignore all of them and just ask you the one thing that I've wanted to ask. And that is, all the other people that were involved in Star Trek, your coworkers and the cast and crew, did any of them ever invite you over for dinner? And if so, who was the best cook?
That's a good question. I've never been asked that before. I don't think it's worth an answer, but George invited me over to dinner. So, yeah, I went to his house. I had several parties in which I invited everybody. Leonard showed up. Bill didn't. We knew that was not going to happen. He wouldn't show up to anything that any of us did, for the cast of Star Trek. I don't get it. I never understood it. He still would have been in the captain. He still would have been the star of the show. You couldn't deny that. But yeah, George, I was with my family. I went over to George's house. That's the only one I think Michelle too. I think there was something Michelle put on early on that we all went to.
So William Shatner never cooked you dinner?
What's that?
William Shatner never cooked you dinner?
No. Yes, next.
Hey there, my name is Saren. I'm a rookie Trek fan. My mom
Can
loves
you
the
talk a
original
little louder?
series.
I'm really hard
Speak
to
up
hear
a
you.
little bit.
My apologies. My name is Saren. I'm a rookie Trekker, and my mom loves the original series. I'd like to know, what's your favorite memory associated with making Star Trek that you've not mentioned?
Well, I have some really wonderful memories. There's no way in the world I can tell that next crowd. My favorite memories, I think, first of all, the first thing that comes to mind is Star Trek 4. I really had a good time. I really felt like I was part of something. Chekhov even had his own music. Yeah, so and I felt he contributed. He contributed to the plot. He wasn't just there to say, Captain, there's something out there. What is it? And then, well, let me see. All the first person pronouns came from him. So we were there just to help push the story along a little bit, or to just say, hey, we've got a multinational group here, so don't forget it, and they just show us walking by. Yeah, in general, Star Trek 4 was my favorite memory. I had a good time on Star Trek 2. I working with Ricardo Montalban. He's a terrific guy. He's just delightful to work with. They had me in a what would be called a hoist of some kind, so that he could lift me up into the air, and they actually were pulling me up into the air. And so I had to really work on my baritone, Captain, it hurts. So that's what I remember. I remember, we once in a while we all hung out, with the exception of Bill, and that was fun. I met a lot of actors, who guest starred, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I've met a huge number of actors since we started doing public appearances. Actors who were on future manifestations of Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, etc. And that was great because I was more friendly with them than I was with my own cast. And I still see those folks, like Denise, Denise Horton. Yeah. And I thoroughly enjoyed meeting up with her again at conventions. And I met a lot of people that were great fun. Patrick Stewart doesn't know who I am. It's really weird. I don't understand it. I don't understand why he doesn't know who I am. I mean, I met him a couple of times early on when we were both sharing studio space. When we were doing our motion picture and he was doing the 7th season of Next Generation. But I remember being in a, I don't know why I'm telling this story. I remember being in a green room and all the Next Gen were there. They had all been invited to this particular convention. And by then I knew most of them. And Patrick Stewart had gotten up to go to the job. And then somebody called, Walter, come on over. So I came over and I sat down on an empty seat. And almost immediately they were all called out of the room. They had to be back at their tables. They had one of these, a talk. So I'm sitting there by myself. Patrick Stewart comes out of the room. He looks at me. I wasn't in costume. I wasn't in makeup. I didn't look like an alien. I had no idea why he had that reaction. Other than he thought I was some fan who was pushing myself into his life, into his world. And I swear to you, I had showered that morning. So that was unpleasant. And it happened again. I never said to him, hey, you know who I am? And that was so corny I couldn't bring myself to say it. But yeah, I really don't think, right now he still doesn't know who I am. Next question.
Hi, I grew up on Star Trek.
I can't hear you.
I grew up on Star Trek, but also on Babylon 5. So thank you for your contributions to our visions of tomorrow. I was wondering what it was like to play the role of Bester on Babylon 5, where you have a much more significant part and seemed that you could really dig your teeth into playing this villainous thorn in your side kind of character.
What was it like to play Bester on Babylon 5?
That was great. I loved playing Bester. I mean, I came to the studio feeling that even though I'm irregular, I'm not talking about my bowel movements here. I'm talking about my performances on the show. I came every so often. I was important to the story. My character was important to the story. It wasn't just there for background. Everybody was terrific. By then, I was done with Star Trek, but everybody had a respect for the show, and all the other actors treated me very well. I had no problems, no complaints. J. Michael Straczynski, who wrote virtually every episode, respectful of my talent and wrote the role that was ultimately challenging. I had fun doing. So I had a great time doing Babylon 5. I'll never not be grateful to Star Trek. I mean, it wasn't Star Trek, there would be nobody here. Not me anyway. So no, I am extraordinarily grateful for the opportunity, and that it keeps giving. It's the gift that keeps giving. It's 60 freaking years later. You know, can't think of his name. It was Thomas Wolfe was a novelist, and he said, "You can't go home again." It became a phrase that he was known for saying, and I guess he said it in one of his novels. It's not true. I've been going home for 60 years. Every time I come to a convention, there are people who are willing to sit down and listen to me talk.
It's
I'm going back.
definitely worth noting. You just had a heart attack before you did Babylon 5.
Yes.
You were recovering, so to bounce back and do that, that's incredible.
Well, I don't know. It was, I had a heart attack at a convention, and I was in the hospital in Chicago for 10 days, and I was supposed to do one episode of Babylon 5. That's all I was scheduled to do. And I mean, this is again the strangeness of life. When you get to be 88, you can philosophize like this. You can talk about these things and give them some credibility. But I think about it, I reflect on how life is. You're not. Well, I never felt like I was in control of my life. Things happen. I was the proverbial leaf in the wind, floating around and landing someplace. And I didn't necessarily have command of whether that was going to be. But so I had a heart attack, and I had to call Joe Straczynski and tell him, "Joe, I'm in the hospital. I will not be available to shoot this episode next week, because that's when it was supposed to be shot." And he says, "Okay, well, we'll hold it. We won't shoot it." Well, that was remarkable. Our business doesn't take into account that kind of virtue. People who think enough of other people who they're willing to make some sacrifice. Well, it turns out there was no way he could not shoot it because they ran out of scripts. So I thought it was a dead issue. Okay, thank God I'm alive. And then I heard from Joe that he found he's writing another character. And again, this is the absurdity of life. How things work out. Because I had a heart attack, I got a recurring role in Babylon. It would have been a one-shot if I hadn't had a heart attack. So I got to do it 12 times. And each time was, great fun. So that's how things happen.
Absolutely. Next question.
I really enjoyed watching classic Star Trek on VHS when I was young, so thanks so much for being part of something so cool. Is there a particular episode of the series that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, well, there was several. A couple that I thought were really bad. I thought the Wade Maiden was preposterous. I had a relatively big role. I had a romantic interest in that episode. But it was a silly idea. I mean, the dirty word was Herbert. If you said Herbert, you're cursing people. Oh, the one good thing about Wade and Eden was, there was one good thing about the Wade and Eden that most people don't know. That we were running long on our episodes, and NBC was very upset about budget. So we were going over budget, way over budget. And so when they hired this director, they told him if he could bring the show in not more than 2 increments into overtime, which I think was like 6 minutes each. Could bring the show within 12 minutes overtime, they'd give him another show. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know why he was so nervous. We got to the end of the day, and there were still three scenes to shoot. And he couldn't shoot all three. First of all, they required shots separately. He couldn't shoot all three and still come in on, at the budget. So he turned to me and said, "You, direct these 2 scenes. Get them ready for the camera." I said, I'm an actor. I'm not an actor. He said, "Well, you're an actor. You should be able to direct it." So he convinced me that I could do it. So he went into the next sound station. So we had 2 sound stations. And he directed the principal scene, and I directed a scene between me and the young lady who was my love interest. Well, I blocked it. I staged it. We actually didn't shoot it until he came running back. I had it all set up. Come out over my shoulders, and it's a dirty shot, and it's a close-up, and then it's a trucking shot. So I'd never done anything like that before. I certainly had never done it. I mean, I'd done it on the stage, but never on the film. And we got it. We got it in the 12 minutes. And you know what? They still didn't bring him back. So anyway, the way Eden was a stolen that I thought was silly. My favorite episode was Spectre of the Gun. And once the gunfight at the OK Corral. And the interesting thing about that episode was, I started to say, NBC was complaining about our expenditures. The show was going over budget. And they were threatening to cancel us all along. And the way that show was originally designed would have cost a lot more money than was in our budget. So they changed it to the whole thing was an illusion, was not really happening. It only was real if you believed that this thing in space was dictating this whole thing. So as long as you didn't believe it was happening, it didn't happen. So we didn't have to build home buildings. We just did fronts. And then you could tell that it wasn't a solid building. So the only thing you had to do was learn that the whole thing was an illusion. Once you learned that, then it couldn't hurt you. Except we didn't learn that until after my character was shot and killed. I died. Then they learned, oh, it's an illusion. But I'm dead. So I went to the story editor. And I said, it's a great scene. I love the whole thing. The shootout, I love dying. But how can my character come back if he didn't know it was an illusion? And he said, yeah, we thought about that. And we said, screw it. So, they added a line at the end. Well, Chekhov the only thing that was real for Chekhov was the girl. So that's the way they try to cut it. Anyway, I like Spectre and that a lot.
Next question.
Hello, thank you very much for your time. I apologize if this is a little bit of a deep cut, but you talked previously, am I too quiet?
A little bit louder.
Oh, sorry, hello. I apologize if this is a little bit of a deep cut, but you talked previously that in the TNG era, there was, some planning or around having Chekhov appear in an episode, and that unfortunately that didn't happen, but one idea you had was playing on the idea that Chekhov's was a ancestor of Worf's adopted family in Russia, I believe?
So Chekhov was going to appear in Next Generation. They were trying to develop that he was going to be like an ancestor.
Yep.
So what kind of happened with that?
I'm like, how do you imagine that character then? Sorry.
They were very successful in bringing Scotty back. Big success that particular episode. And I think they also brought the forest back at some point.
Yeah.
So they got around to Chekhov, and I got a call, and they said they were thinking about that. And I started trying to come, but there were 2 provisions. Couldn't be time travel, and it couldn't halogen, what is it called? The card count? Hologram. It couldn't be a hologram. So anything else, if you could find a way to bring it back, would be great. So I went out with one of the writers, the head writer. We had lunch, and we couldn't think of anything. And then he called me in. And this is one of the enigmas, the things, you know, you think about from time to time. It doesn't, it's not a specter that, you know, is in my prison, my reality all the time. But I wonder what the happened. I got called in, and I was, all the writers and the producers, well, not all the producers, but all the writers and people involved behind the camera were sitting there. And I came in, and we were going to exchange ideas and come up with something that would be okay for Chekhov to come back. My hand to God, which is worthless because I don't have any strong religious feelings. But the phone rings 15 seconds after I'm sitting down. Oh, it was more like that. And whoever answered it got off the phone, looked at the others, and they all left. They all left the room. I'm sitting there alone. What happened to this meeting? The only thing that I can see is that Garen Berman, who was the producer, because he wasn't there, objected to this idea. Either objected to Chekhov being on the show, or objected to my input, and he told everybody to get the hell out. And that was the end of it. Never heard again. As far as the story that you've heard, that was my idea. I came up with it ultimately, and that's when I found out that Michael Doran's character was in some way related to Chekhov's grandparents. When I found that out to be a fact, I have an idea. And my idea was that Doran became ill, and he started to hallucinate. And he hallucinates characters. And that's how I appear on the words of the show. Nobody else can see me except my movie. But it was too late. Right? And then the game was over.
That would have been cool to see.
Yeah, that would have.
Next question.
Yes, were you ever asked to do a musical album much like Shatner and Nimoy did?
Well, certainly not as badly as I cannot believe that Bill Shatner. What was the song?
Rocket Man.
Rocket Man.
And Tambourine Man.
I showed that tape to my daughter and her friends who were about 10 or 11 at the time. And they said, I mean, it's obviously a comedy, right? No, it's not a comedy. This is Bill Shatner singing. So, and then I heard that Leonard's musical talent was limited. I'm trying to get polite. I mean, I would never do it. Well, as a matter of fact, no, that's not true. That's not true. Somebody thought that I could be another Bobby Sherman or Davy Jones. Honest to God. Oh, God, this is a terrible story. It's one of those stories that is not a success. So the manager I had at the time got me an interview with a company called Cold Gems, and they were doing music. And they were doing music using actors and people who were not necessarily professional vocals. And they gave me a song to work on. There was a group called, I can't think of it. Anyway, it was by this group. And so I went home and I worked on this song. And I recorded it in the bathroom, thinking the echo, the bathroom echo would enhance what was already going to be terrific. Oh my physical illness. It's just something that happens. You know, you are not a singer, Walter. Get over it. So I bring in the tape, and they all come out. All these guys. They're all sitting around the room. I turn on the tape, and I start, and I hear. And we have to listen to my 3 minutes in so agony, so much pain. And they wanted to leave, they wanted to flee. I mean, if the building was on fire, they couldn't have wanted to get out more quickly. So yeah, so that was my entire experience as a vocalist. And I learned from that. But as far as those guys were concerned, well, they were the leads in the show, and they were even as bad as they weren't as bad as I was.
Next question.
Hi again. I don't know if before you came over here, I'm Isaac. But mine was more of a comment. You brought up earlier in the discussion about all the parties that you hosted and people would come over. And after I got done talking to you, I was talking to Martin from Pirates of the Caribbean. He said he was over at your house once and that you're an amazing host. So I just came up to tell you that you are an amazing host.
You're an amazing host to people at your house. You make good meals for them. Martin Kleba said that about you.
Oh, really? Oh, that's nice.
That's what I
I don't know what to say.
Hi there.
I was just wondering if you like watching Star Trek New World. If you just like watching it.
Do you still watch Star Trek, or do you watch it sometimes?
Well, actually, I was invited to participate in a podcast and to critique the old episodes. And I've been doing that on about a twice monthly basis, where they send me an episode and I watch it and I take notes, and then the next day we do a podcast, a Zoom cast, and I talk about the show. What I thought was
I got a
good,
quick
what was
follow-up.
bad, the incidents, involved with the show, anything that happened, between shots. That's been kind of fun. I've enjoyed it.
Do you like the newer Star Treks, or is it just like no? I
Do
don't
you like the new series of Star Trek, like Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, that kind of stuff? Have you checked any of that out?
Not really. I haven't taken them out. Strange New Worlds, Lower Depths, I haven't seen those. I saw the one Picard episode, which very familiar voice came over the PA. I saw that because the voice sounded familiar.
How did it feel to do that? Because they named the character after Anton.
Yeah, that was very nice. I thought they named it was Anton Chekhov, my son, and he had passed away. And he was a delightful, charming, talented young man, and it was a great tragedy. So in honor of him, I became not Pavel Chekhov, but Anton Chekhov, and they came to my house and recorded the sound, and it was fun. It was a nice thing to do.
Do you not like the new ones as much as the old ones? That's what you say.
Are the new ones just not something you wanted to check out that much?
I don't watch much television.
That's fair.
I really don't. I don't watch much television. I watch forensic files. I don't know what's going on. And I used to watch a particular news show that I found was in keeping with my particular sympathies. But it's so depressing now that I don't even watch that. I used to watch MSNBC. That was a very liberal station.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question.
Given the current climate of the United States, do you have any words of hope for our future? Will we ever make it to Starfleet Academy?
Yeah, how can we get to the ideals of Star Trek today, in today's climate? Can we get there?
I think it's going to be harder than it has been. It can only get worse. It's kind of like, well, I'm sure there are a lot of Trumpians here who just love the man. I cannot tolerate the concept of a presidency with Mr. Trump. But in any case, he's not going to make it easier for us to create the ideals of Star Trek. That's for sure.
Next question.
Yeah. So I was kind of curious
Speak up.
So I was kind of curious playing the character Chekhov in a post-McCarthy era. Were there any incidents you remember that were funny or otherwise?
This is a good one. Did you have any incidents? Because you came up in a post-McCarthyan era. Did you have issues with the Russian character? Did anybody kind of give you trouble for that?
That's an interesting question. Curiously, I did not. Well, first of all, my fan base was all little kids, you know, and they were interested in my hair, not my politics. However, my parents were both from the Soviet Union, and my father in particular was a diehard leftist. And I remember in the 40s when Joe McCarthy came on the scene and started looking for communists everywhere in the State Department, that my father was concerned that we were going to be taken away because he was very articulate and very vocal about his sympathies. I don't know if he actually ever belonged to the Communist Party, because we knew that we were being investigated, but we were never investigated personally. Nobody ever came to us. They came to people in our apartment house and asked them about the Koenigs and what they were doing and what they were up to. So my father talked about it all the time, but it didn't come to pass. But it was, and I found it kind of ironic that I'm playing a Russian. I would have loved for my father to have seen me play a Russian. That would have been so neat. He passed away before I had my first professional role. Yeah, so it's an interesting question that never came up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to be wrapping it up. I just want to thank you so much for being here, telling your stories. So you have to read Warp Factors. He tells lots more stories. I could listen all day, and I think you guys could too. So let's give a big round of applause.